There's this paper from 2025 called "Where Did the Global Elite Go to School? Hierarchy, Harvard, Home, and Hegemony." And one of the main findings of this study is that a small number of globally prestigious universities takes on super prominent roles in the global elite, suggesting there's a strongly hierarchical distribution of credentials among the global elite. So there is a disproportionate influence on who gets to decide things in this world among universities. And so I think there's a specific importance to the question of who even gets into these institutions that later on serve as funnels into global elites. Now, my personal relation to this question is that I, for the most time of my life, did not consider myself someone who would go to a so-called elite university. And the reason is that I'm a first-generation student. I come from a rural area in Bavaria, and so a place like Oxford, where I study today, largely felt like just a different world that was not for me. And the decisive barrier now, when I look back, was not ability, it was navigation. It was a lack of navigational ability. I lacked a sense of whether such a path was for someone like me. And this is where most talented young students kind of get stuck in this process. And you can see me here with one of the mentors I had in my first scholarship. So I did my undergraduate degree at the Technical University of Munich. And Franz, who you can see on the right, was a person like me, coming from the Bavarian countryside. And then he made it to Oxford for his PhD. And because he was the first person in my life with that kind of journey, he had a huge impact on my later educational journey. So the core problem that I want to talk about today is that formal openness is obviously not the same as practical access. So pathways in education can be legally open to almost anyone, and they may even be financially possible in principle and meritocratic on paper. So the selection may be fair on paper, but still they might be practically inaccessible. And this is what Franz and I, in a paper that we're crafting at the moment, want to call navigational injustice, because it goes beyond formalities and beyond justice on paper. Now, where in this process of even becoming an applicant and then becoming a student at a prestigious universities do students self-eliminate? We propose 6 stages in this process, and we use the image of a funnel, which I think is quite well established in other parts of educational research. For example, the question of how many people from non-academic households go to university in the first place versus children from academic parents. And the first stage we suggest is awareness. So even knowing about the possibility, even knowing a certain scholarship exists, for example, and having heard of a university or a degree that might be for you. But then the second stage is consideration, even giving it consideration and thinking, well, this could be for someone like me. The third step would then be understanding, meaning to understand what they want. So what does the university want from an applicant? What does a scholarship want from its scholarship holders? And what do I need to even start crafting a kind of credible application? Then the fourth step would be preparation. So can I actually build a credible application? Do I have the support maybe I need for that? The fifth would be submission. So I think way more often than you would think, students decide in this last step before submitting not to do that because they doubt themselves and they think, again, this is not for someone like me. I'm not good enough. and they stop themselves in this process. And sixth would then be enrollment and actually starting to study there, which again can be another barrier at the very last moment, even after getting it submitted, because you may still find yourself doubting yourself or facing a last minute financial barrier, for example, or formal barrier that can prevent you from going. Now, this kind of barrier map, obviously at this point is not a quantitatively well-evidenced map, but we use it as a practical diagnostic map. And I'm going to try to illustrate several of these steps later on today and tell you what we can do as different actors in the educational system to help students overcome these barriers. A small barrier, or a supposedly seemingly small barrier, is not small for everyone. So while you may think that everyone kind of knows what Oxford or Cambridge is, or everyone knows the major scholarships in Germany, that's very often not the case. And very often students hear too late about a certain scholarship even existing. To give you a kind of concrete example, when German students want to study abroad, and this may be a so-called elite university or just any other university, one of the main funding sources is the German Academic Exchange Service. But if you want to have full year funding or a master's funding from the DAAD, you usually have to apply over a year in advance. And it happens very often that my mentees tell me they wouldn't have known about that scholarship if I hadn't told them, or we get in touch with them too late and they actually miss that deadline. Other examples are when students don't know what fit or potential even means in selection for a prestigious program, when they have no one to read a motivation letter, or when they see a seemingly small fee of, say, €100, and then they think it's probably not worth it. And this is an important example to me because these barriers compound. So while €100 may seem a small barrier, it's not just about the money itself, it's how it interacts differently with applicants based on your background. So for a less privileged potential applicant, it may be that they already underestimate their own chances of even getting admitted to a prestigious program, and then seeing that extra barrier of €100 kind of multiplies with that. And so their calculation in the end will be, it's not worth it. Even rationally thinking about it, it's not worth it because my chances are so low. Whereas for a lot of students from more privileged background, it's like, it doesn't matter. I can pay those 100, even if my chances are super low. And these kinds of differences are what we're trying to outline more in our work. Which barriers matter most? So what we're proposing is that the biggest barriers are often interpretive and not formal. So this kind of correlates to some of these 6 barriers listed before, but just to give a few examples. Obviously, information is a first step, knowing that an option exists, but then it is often very important to translate what you see on a website or in a certain leaflet into the implicit rules that come with it. And to give you an example, the German Academic Scholarship Foundation, the Studienstiftung, they require a so-called, like a detailed CV, a so-called ausformulierter Lebenslauf as part of their application process. But if things haven't changed very recently, I don't think they ever tell you what that is and what they require you to write in a detailed CV. And these are the small things that make a huge difference for an applicant and make a huge difference between applicants from more and less privileged backgrounds. Similar with timing, you're often not told when to start preparing the application. So you might need someone who's done it and who can tell you. Then having confidence to believe this path is realistic, assessing risks correctly, and not underestimating yourself, but also not overestimating your chances. And then as last step, also belonging. So imagining someone like you in these institutions. So the key point there is that information alone is rarely enough. Raj Chetty, kind of well-known economist researching educational choices, says that low-intensity information, just kind of spreading information, hosting information events, is kind of helpful, but it has very limited effects because it usually does not incentivize or animate any less privileged student to really apply. What's different from that is individual guidance. And there's a recent paper from several scholars, I think based at Cologne University, that looked at guidance counseling, so universities' guidance counseling, and how that can change decisions. And this study actually finds that guidance counseling massively increases higher education enrollment among students from lower social origins or less privileged backgrounds if it's done well. So we can see that this more intensive guidance is quite effective. And more generally, mentoring can play a huge role in substituting missing support networks, basically substituting a lack of social capital. And that's what we do, to just say something briefly about our organization. So Project Access, in a nutshell, is an organization that helps less privileged students cross this gap between potential and application. And what we provide is completely free one-to-one mentoring, but also practical resources like template CVs, template motivation letters, template reference letters, because that's another barrier often in these application processes, that you will need 3 or so reference letters. And as a person from a non-academic family, I can tell you, you usually don't know what they are, and you're not expecting what might happen in the process, which is that the professor then asks you to draft this letter. So it really helps if you can lend people a hand there. And we use peer knowledge from students and alumni. So we have a lot of students who are currently at these target universities like Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and then get in touch with our mentees. And as a last kind of component of our work, we also do some policy and outreach work, which is also why I'm here today. Now, what can student initiatives do to help? Obviously, you can do something like we do, but more generally, try to be translators. So as I said, it's often about interpreting formal rules. So try to help people with application timeline planning. It can make a huge difference if a student doesn't even have the possibility to always doubt themselves at each point, at each stage of this application process, but rather, together with a mentor, has drawn up a complete timeline where it's clear when what needs to happen, and then it just will happen. And you just tell them you will submit the application by this deadline, and it massively reduces the risk of people kind of self-eliminating throughout the application process. Then obviously provide them feedback on the documents and prepare them for interviews. So make them have mock interviews. And one of the most important things, make them aware as early as possible of any funding and scholarship guidance and encourage them to apply even when they think they do not meet all of the criteria. What universities and funders like scholarship bodies can do is reduce the navigation costs. So this is what this goes back to the example before of this detailed CV. Try to explain every application component. There are some best practices actually. So some universities are really good at giving guidance, but I think most are not. Try to make it clear what each document is supposed to contain, and do not assume that the student will kind of know anyway, or will have someone to tell them. Publish clear timelines that include all the preparation time that realistically should be taken into account, and maybe give examples, like anonymized examples of a previous application process of the person. Show how you use contextual information. So be explicit about the fact that you consider stuff like being from a less privileged family, and not just focusing on academic performance. Waive or reduce application fees. So that's something I think that a lot of universities could easily implement, because it's usually not a huge part of their budget, especially when we talk about these so-called elite universities. They don't really need that money. And as I said, I think it has a disproportionate effect depending on the applicant's background. Offer early and targeted outreach. So this is a super important point to me, because I've, in different initiatives for educational justice, gone to high schools, for example, to talk about funding your studies, to talk about how to get into university if you're the first in your family to do that. And there are quite a lot of organizations in Germany doing that, and they are doing really valuable work. But one of the major issues that I saw is these organizations are usually not coordinated. So you have several organizations visit the same already relatively privileged high schools usually, and doing that in parallel. And then you have a lot of other schools that never get targeted by anyone, not by any scholarship foundation, not even by maybe Arbeiterkind.de or an NGO like that. So I think one of the most important and in principle low cost improvement we could have is coordination among these initiatives. So try to share outreach maps, share information on who you've contacted and which schools you've been to avoid duplication, and specifically target those schools with fewer existing access resources. Now, this is an example of what a university can do specifically. We also have a partnership with at least one German university, but I'm going to stick to this example of Cambridge now. It's, I think, the longest running direct cooperation we have with a university, and specifically with Christ's College. So what happens there is that the college actually pays us small amounts as to us as an NGO, and then we provide mentoring to less privileged applicants that want to go to Cambridge, and kind of accompany people, these people all along the way into Cambridge. And this also creates a nice network, because obviously even once you're enrolled and once you're at this university, there's still like the university statistics show that there's still a higher risk of a less privileged student dropping out compared to someone from a more privileged background. So it's super important to also have people in this institution, at this place, that can help you integrate yourself in this new environment, in this new world. And that's what can happen with this kind of mentoring. I think we can skip that and go to the conclusion. For me, in the end, the question is not only who gets in, because as I said, usually these admissions processes are meritocratic on paper, and they do not obviously not actively discriminate or consciously discriminate. But we also need to look at the process before that. So who disappears before even applying? And what's often done is that we only study applicants, like the universities, for example, they study applicants, and it's clear that's easier because that's where you have data yourself. But then you miss students who heard too late, students who misunderstood requirements, students who lacked encouragement, or students who decided the risk was not worth it. And kind of the metaphor that you could have is that equal opportunity is not achieved when doors are just formally open, like when you can see they're open, but it also requires that students can see this door, understand the handle, and have someone to walk them through. And that's what we need more of in the education system at large, but specifically if we talk about these prestigious universities where there may be some extra barriers, both in people's minds, but also just out there. And if you now, because I saw that there are some people attending who work in universities and maybe know students that could be interested in getting this kind of guidance, I just put this here. So we're providing a free online bootcamp where we help people apply to these top universities. So feel free to share this information. You can also just Google for it and you should find it. And it's like 1 weekend long intense preparation boot camp, where we help people to even decide where to apply if they want to apply to one of those prestigious universities, and then help them throughout the process. And if things go really well, you might end up like we did in just last month in May in my college at Oxford. And this is our current team, but I should also say that some of the people you can see here are also former mentees that we helped get into such a university and are now part of our team.